The Victorian government made headlines for all the wrong reasons in 2023 when it pulled out of hosting the Commonwealth Games on the grounds that it was too expensive. Now, the Games are on in Glasgow, with many locals barely registering that it's even taking place in their city, according to our reporter on the ground. I'm Samantha Salinger-Morris, and you're listening to the Morning Edition from The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. Today, senior sports writer Michael Gleeson on whether the competition, which started in 1930 as a means for the colonies to unite and honor the monarchy, is on its last legs. It's July the 29th. Welcome, Michael, to the podcast.
Thanks very much for having me, all the way from Scotland.
Exactly. Well, we can't wait to get stuck into this with you because I think I might be like many listeners. I'm not a massive follower of the Commonwealth Games. I don't actually know so much about why it matters. But now you are in Glasgow, like you've said, you're there for the Games, and it's been widely reported that this has been severely stripped back, right? Less sports, fewer athletes. So talk to us, I guess, a bit about why this matters and why has it been stripped back this year?
Well, it matters to Australia because we win a lot. So we like a sport, we like a competition where we dominate, and certainly that's true here. The Commonwealth Games are one of the few multi-sport carnivals, like an Olympics, and they were always a mini Olympics, but they just became too expensive. Now, this Games is particularly interesting because the Games look like they were dead. After Victoria pulled the pin on hosting them,
the Games will not proceed in Victoria in 2026.
With what was always a folly.
Frankly, $6 to $7 billion for a 12-day sporting event, we are not doing that.
It was a crazy idea to have a rural games, a country games in Victoria that it was inconceivable that it would go ahead. To anyone that had actually been to a games and seen the size of them, seen the infrastructure needed, to think that you would have a games in Victoria in only rural areas was crazy. So in the breach, Glasgow jumped in. They said, well, we'll do it. But, being here now and having been here for the 2014 Commonwealth Games, which were fantastic, they built the city up, they polished the city up, it was looking schmick, it looked fantastic. Everyone bought in, it was a full Commonwealth Games, there was bus services, heaps of tourists here, the whole city was buzzing with it. Here now, it's a bit like being told at the last minute that you're the one of your friends that's got to host the dinner party, and you say, "All right, well, you all bring the food, and don't bring your kids because I'm sick of them and there's too many of them, and I've got to work in the morning, so you're all going to leave early." And honestly, they're holding their nose through it. That's how it feels.
Okay, so a bit of a political question here, because obviously Scotland has had a bit of a separatist movement from the Empire. So is part of it, are the sort of British Empire vibes like a bit on the nose there? Is that part of the reason why perhaps the Scottish are a little bit... No.
I don't think it is because, actually, the last time the Games were on here was in 2014, and it was right at the time of the referendum, which they then voted to remain within the UK. So I don't think it's that. I think it's just this was foisted on them. They've agreed to have it. And so it's really interesting. I think the whole Commonwealth Games concept here fumbled it a bit because they thought that this would salvage something from the Games that was going to die. So they just said, whatever form you can put it on, we don't want a mini Olympics, just do it. So there's a winnowed back number of sports. There's obviously swimming and there's athletics. They're the two big ones. But then they've got, they've got gymnastics and weightlifting and bowls, indoor bowls. But there's no road races. There's no marathon. There's no, there will be cycling, but there's no, other key sports. Like there's no hockey. Massive in India. There's no rugby sevens, which is big throughout all the other Pacific countries and the rest of the Commonwealth. There's no rowing, which is really big in the UK. They didn't have those because they're team sports that you would have had to bring in much bigger teams for, much more infrastructure, you would have had more venues required. They didn't have it. Now, why I say that was a mistake is because at the time they made those decisions, they didn't have anyone else putting their hand up to have any more Commonwealth Games. They couldn't find any other venue other than Perth, I think, wanted to hold this one. They didn't have another city saying, we'll fill the breach, let alone do the one in a few years' time. Since then, though, India has said, we will take the next games in 4 years' time, because India wants to bid for the 2036 Olympics. And they want to show the world and the IOC that they can actually host an event of this type, because they stuffed it up so badly when they held the Delhi Commonwealth Games that no one was ever going to send a major event there again, because it was just so badly handled. But on top of that, when they had the games here last time, the athletics was on at Hampton Park. It held 40,000 people. They've got it on at a track now in Scotstoun Hill, which holds, well, really only about 8,000 punters that are getting in. That's tiny. And it's just not, as a consequence, doesn't have that buzz. And further to that, it hasn't brought in the tourists the way another one would, when you've got big volumes of sports and you've got lots of teams and things, lots of things that you can get access to, even free things like, the walks and the road races and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of people, you go into, places, restaurants and bars, and they say, what are you here for? The Commonwealth Games. Oh, that's right. That's on. Yeah.
And so you mentioned there before that Glasgow went into this. Obviously, it was a sort of last minute arrangement, and they were not going to look at this as being a bit of a mini Olympics. But as a layperson, like, the Commonwealth Games sort of strikes me as the poor cousin of the Olympics. I don't know if that's fair, but I guess talk to me about the relevance. Fair. Yeah, right. Okay. So talk to me, I guess, about the relevance of the Commonwealth Games to the athletes and particular sports. Is this like an important jumping off point during the year for our athletes to train for the Olympics, or what's the relevance here?
No, it's huge. The whole multi-sport thing, carnival, is really important. They really enjoy it. They really do peg themselves for it. I mean, but they also have it in its perspective. Like Gout, the biggest name in athletics, was not going to compete, or he hasn't competed here and wasn't going to compete here because he planned to compete at the World Juniors, which are on next week. But look, what it does is it really varies here. So Rose Davies won gold in the 10,000 metres in the athletics. Davies beat two African runners who were 1 and 2 in just won the African, they were gold and silver in the African Championships. And the African runners have dominated the 10,000 metres. No Australian woman's ever won over that distance at Commonwealth level. So that's a phenomenal performance. In the men's 1500, which will be the event of the athletics and probably of the games, is you've got Josh Kerr, who just broke the world record for the marathon, running against Cam Myers, who just broke the Australian record over 1,500 metres. He's only 20. He's the rising star of the whole sport. Then you've got Jake Whiteman, who's a world champion. So you've got these world champions, and you've got the two chariots from Kenya, who are just stars of the sport. It is an absolute world-class field. So it matters because it's also that sort of championship level running is really different to even diamond leagues or to the swimming. And athletes really like it too, because they know that the public likes it, particularly in Australia. And low-profile sports, they don't get their moment in the sun. They're squeezed of oxygen by, both all the football codes, and they get their little windows every 2 or 4 years. Well, every 2 years, because you get an Olympics and then a Commonwealth Games. In between, you have the Worlds and that sort of thing. But because they don't get that moment, that's their chance to really be on telly, become a public, a household name.
After the break.
In the scale of things that Victoria's wasted money on, from the big build and the corruption in that, this just adds to the list. People have almost forgotten that they'd committed this and wasted the money on it.
Tell us, I guess, a bit about how expensive these games are, because obviously it made huge news here that the Victorian state government had announced in January 2022 it was in serious consideration to host the games. And then, a month later, Premier Victoria at the time, Daniel Andrews, confirmed that, he was in exclusive negotiations to host this. And then, of course, next year, state government pulls out saying it's way too expensive. So how expensive are they?
Look, I wish I knew. I wish I could answer that accurately, because the Victorian government was just making numbers up on the fly at the time. It's going to cost $6 billion. Did I see 6? I might have meant 7. 7, maybe it was 8.
It is in fact at least $6 billion and could be as high as $7 billion. And I cannot stand here and say to you that I have any confidence that even $7 billion number would appropriately and adequately fund these games. I think it could be more than that. Now, there's a whole range of reasons for that. Today's not about...
There is no doubt to put them on at the scale they wanted in Victoria, it was going to be super expensive. But that's also because they chose this stupid idea to think that they could host them all in regional centres and not utilise existing infrastructure and not utilise the MCG. And, that was completely unnecessary and silly. And to think that smaller towns had the capacity to host athletes and get the volunteers they want and think that they were going to bring in tourists and have places for them to stay and not just be commuting back and forth on the train and staying in Melbourne anyway was ridiculous. And anyone that had been to any of the Commonwealth or Olympic Games before that knew that immediately and thought, this just isn't going to happen. And eventually the government gets to the point of realisation themselves. Now, they could have changed all of that. They could have still, with the Victorian government, said, you know what, we overestimated. Rather than just pull the pin on the whole thing, we're going to host it, but it's going to be in, we are going to use Victoria, we are going to use Melbourne, we are going to use Geelong, we're going to use the pool we have there and the track. They could have done a much scaled-back version, but they basically just said, we're out.
And we have seen reporting, though, that the total cost of the Games to Victorians is over $589 million. So I guess, is it worth the cost? I mean, how much anger is there, I guess, perhaps in Victoria that the taxpayers are on the hook for this money, even though Victoria didn't, of course, end up hosting it, get whatever tourists they might have got from it. What can you tell us about that, Michael?
Look, in the scale of things that Victoria's wasted money on, from the big build and the corruption in that, I don't, this just adds to the list. People have almost forgotten that they'd committed this and wasted the money on it. It was, like, I don't want to be, be Pollyanna about it, but it's just, when you look at how that could have still been scaled back to a better version than this, and when you looked at the fact that it was just never going to be what they thought it was, what they were selling it to be, it's ridiculous to think that it was conceived of in the first place.
And when, of course, Victoria did finally announce that it was pulling out of hosting the Commonwealth Games, the Commonwealth Games Authority certainly expressed some disappointment. They said that they were only given 8 hours notice. I mean, they were a bit filthy about it sounded like, from their announcement. So I guess let's just talk about the reduction of the number of sports from 20 in 2022 to 10 this year. Is this Victoria's fault? Did the government kill the games, Michael?
Yeah. Well, they nearly killed the entire concept, and the Indians have saved it, and the Scots to that degree as well. Certainly, the Brits didn't want the concept to fall, and they looked at a whole range of options of sending it back to Birmingham, spreading it between Birmingham, maybe Manchester, possibly Liverpool, having it in the smaller cities and spreading it through there, because they didn't want, England in particular, didn't want the concept to go. Glasgow obviously stepped in and took it on, but they did so on the basis that this isn't going to be costing us money. And that's what they kept selling to their own people. We'll do it, but it's not going to cost the Scots. It's going to be funded by the CGA and by basically the Victorian government. And
is that what happened in the end? The Scots haven't been footing the bill for. Wow,
they haven't. They're saying it's not costing the taxpayers. That's what they keep stressing here.
Is that the case?
Yeah, well, to the best of my knowledge, it is, yeah.
Okay. And so, Michael, just to wrap up, I mean, we know that the next Commonwealth Games is in India in 4 years' time. That's locked in. But talk to us, I guess, a bit about the future of this event. I mean, is it at risk? Is it going to keep going? I mean, this is an interesting event in terms of, I guess it's where sport and politics also sort of merge, because there's an argument that, well, traditional allies have been frayed under Donald Trump. He's sort of eroded many alliances. So is there an argument that perhaps the Commonwealth Games are more important than ever to sort of solidify these ties between countries that perhaps do see eye to eye more than not in this time?
Well, the Canadians certainly finally found someone that's friendly to them again, other than the country that wants to take them over as another state. So they're very proudly wearing their red and their maple leaves anywhere they are here, to say, I know you can hear my accent, but I'm not one of those ones that you think I am. I'm a Canadian. I think that it's a really interesting point you make about the future of it. I think it's been saved. And a lot of it now is going to hinge on India and how they handle it and what kind of games they put on in 4 years' time. But then it's also, by doing this with Glasgow, even though it might not be this again, what they've at least done is open the idea that cities can offer to host it without hosting a mini Olympics. And they can say, look, we'll host it, but we'll host these 7 sports. And they may not be the same ones every time. It may not be that, you're always going to have athletics and swimming because they're so big in the thing. But you could be changing around. But as the Olympics has done, they've tried to say we can't be sort of bankrupting cities by asking them to host these games. So therefore, we have to be open to, you must utilise existing facilities, as many existing facilities as you have, but also have legacy facilities. That if you build something, you're leaving something behind. And that was the silly thing about what Victoria did. They were going to build things that then ripped them down again, while they actually had purpose-built facilities that they could have used.
Michael, thank you so much for your time there with you on the ground in Scotland.
Thank you. Thanks for the interest in the Commonwealth Games because, it's good fun. I mean, they are laughed at as the school sports, but they're better than that. Like, as I said, some of these events are genuine world class and they're fun. The games are fun.
Today's episode was produced by Chi Wong. Our executive producer is Tammy Mills, and our podcasts are overseen by Lisa Muxworthy and Tom McKendrick. If you like our show, follow The Morning Edition and leave a review for us on Apple or Spotify. Thanks for listening.